Welcome to episode number 281 of Destination Linux, a text digital podcast. Woohoo! Whether you're brand new to open source or a guru of sudo, this is the podcast for you. My name is Jill.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Ryan. Woohoo! I wanted to join in the excitement. Jill.
I approve.
A Destination Linux Extreme. So on this week's awesome episode of Destination Linux, we're going to be guiding you to the best alternatives to all of the Adobe Creative Cloud tools. Then we will be discussing a new phone that's guaranteed to get your open source blood flowing. Plus we have our tips, tricks, and software picks. All this and more coming up right now on Destination Linux to keep those penguins marching. So this week, let's find out what Michael's been up to lately. Michael, what have you been up to in the world of Linux?
So I have a lot of stuff I've been working on, but I want to talk about something specific too that relates to this show, because we're going to be talking about some art-related stuff in the show. And I've been working on some art this week, multiple different things of art this week, actually. And I wanted to show it off here in the visuals on the video. So if you're watching or listening to the audio-only version, you can check out the visuals in the video version this week because they are going to be important to this particular piece. And as you can see here, there are 3 different art pieces that I've done for the new name of my channel, Tunnel Vision. Also, Das Geek. I decided to update Das Geek's channel. He didn't even know I was doing that. I just felt like doing it.
So
I did.
Good, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I also made some new podcast art for Linux Saloon, and I used a piece of software that we're going to be talking about later in the show that's an alternative to the Adobe suite. So that's going to be sweet. Anyway. I also have been working on another thing that's another piece of art that's related to this, and we're going to be going to scale. We've talked about that on a couple of episodes, and we decided to make a banner to take to scale with us to kind of promote all the different podcasts and shows and stuff like that we have on the network, and this is what the banner looks like that we're going to be making. So hopefully you like it. Let us know in the comments what you think, and also on the forum. I'm curious what you think. I know Ryan loves it because basically he loves every piece of art that I make, which is proof by the DOS
I am
thing.
a fan. I am a fan of your art, and it's because it's truly awesome. Like, I don't like complimenting you, but in this case, I have to. Your art here is incredible. The work that you do with the logos is incredible. Mm-hmm. The whole design of this, the color usage. So I did have a part in the colors, I want to say. I feel like I had a part in that.
You did.
Because we spent all night looking at different products to figure out the right shades of blue and things that advertisers use to kind of get people's attention and things. There's so much work that goes into this. It's not like Michael can just sit down and just start putting logos around on a page and make a banner.
Right.
But in this case, we were trying to find the right blues that would pop the most with the logos behind them. And then you had to create a whole new logo set that would work for certain shows because a lot of us all have our banners already, but they don't necessarily fit in this format. So you had to go create brand new logos so that it would fit and have that pop that we're looking for. But my favorite part is the last logo there, which is add your show here, because this is an open network and people can come and join Destination Linux. If you've got something that you've created, if it's family friendly and meets some of the standards that we have, you can come join this network. And that, to me, promoting that at the conference is pretty awesome because I'm sure there's a lot of people there who want to become creators there. But your work here, Michael, honestly, it's incredible. I absolutely love it. I cannot wait to see this banner in person.
Oh,
what did you use to create it?
Well, we're going to be talking about it later in the show, and it's actually Photopea. I used Photopea to create it. I also used something else to create it, and we'll talk about that when we get towards in the main topic.
Make me wait.
Because
nice.
It's interesting and it's a little bit more depth that we got to cover. But also, I just want to make sure everybody knows I was not fishing for compliments, but I appreciate that I got them. So
you don't have to. This really is tremendous work. You do amazing work for the network, and we appreciate it.
yeah, I actually can't wait to see what it looks like either, because I've not really done these sorts of things for conferences. Most of my work, I've done print work and digital work, but this is kind of a combination of both. And also, it's a very gigantic banner for that you can't really see on the screen. So for those who don't know, I'm a fairly tall person, and this is much taller than me. I think this is going to be a little bit more than 7 feet tall, something like that. So it's going to be interesting to see this completed. I can
And Jill, that is 7 foot by 70 foot. So we hope that you got us a big enough booth.
Yeah.
We
we'll be
really
fine.
want people to see Destination Linux here.
Okay, so Ryan, this is not really practical to use our style of describing things for the virtual stadium, where it's we can endlessly talk. This is actual size of a product. So unfortunately, it's not going to be 70.
I want a 70-foot banner.
All right,
70-foot banner or nothing.
Next time, I promise.
Yeah, Michael, to reiterate what Ryan said, I love your eye for design and your use of color. You're brilliant at that, truly.
Thank you.
Ooh, someone mentioned putting a QR code in there, man. That's not a terrible idea, too. For scanning.
yeah.
That's pretty dope.
I like it.
Thank you for that.
I will have to adjust my design to fit that, but I like the idea. So now I have to figure out where to put the QR code.
We could just print one out on paper and put it over your beautiful design. You just stick it on the banner,
Exactly.
Yeah, we'll just ruin the banner. That's how I would solve this problem. That's how I do. That's how I do art. You know what? I just realized this episode, you definitely want to watch the video version of this, because later on, I'm going to give a little sneak peek. There is a piece of my art that we'll be displaying, and I expect Jill and Michael that I get the compliments I gave back in spades when you see my art here that I worked on.
Hey, Ryan, I don't know if I'd call that art.
What?
Jill!
Wow.
Jill! The loving, beautiful Jill has attacked?
I am teasing you.
I love
What
it.
is happening?
I love it. The honesty right there, Ryan. You just got to
My
respect
heart,
it. You just
my
gotta respect it.
heartstrings just tore in half. You know what? We have to recover from this by getting into the community feedback. We'll talk to you later, Jill, about
Okay.
So this week's community feedback comes from Jack. And if you want to send your own feedback, you can go to tuxdigital.com/contact to get in touch, or join the Tux Digital community forum by going to tuxdigital.com and clicking on the forum link at the top. Jack goes on to say, there is something special about Destination Linux. It's like a familiar and cozy environment where you always want to return to. I've been looking for something like this for a long time. To be honest, I'm not a person who follows a lot of podcasts. I try to stay focused on my work, and I usually don't follow YouTube channels or podcasts because most of the time I think it's a waste of time. But Destination Linux is different. Consider yourself the best podcast on the entire internet, in my humble opinion, and the only one on my list that tells the truth. Michael must be a positive and friendly person because through his work, he attracts such wonderful people. Wait.
Absolutely agree. 100%.
What?
Absolutely agree.
Most
yeah.
positive for sure. Actually, a lot of people say this. I've heard many people say this, that me and Jill are essentially the same person.
Oh yeah. So many people.
I've heard that so many times.
I've heard you say it so many times.
Okay, that's at least one person though, Ryan. So
It's true. It's true. You know what? I'll give it to you. They go on to say, you brought back something I hadn't seen in a long time, especially in the online environment. Good jokes, silly pranks, and all the conversational dynamics make the podcast so enjoyable. But above all, you brought information in a way I've never seen before, especially for this community where the conversation tone is usually different. Finally, I'd like to leave a question for everyone. What stickers deserve to be on your notebook? You know what? I just love this email so much. Not only is it so kind, I feel like Jill wrote it. Like, it really is one of the nicest emails I think we've ever received. Unfortunately, it was very long, so I had to condense some portions of it, but it just went on, and it was just so kind. But this question is such a good one. I have so much to say on this topic just recently. We'll get there. He wants to know what stickers deserve to be on your notebooks. Many people use stickers on notebooks. Some people use stickers to support projects, which is a good attitude. So if you had to choose the projects you'd be supporting by putting stickers on your notebook, which project would those be? They can't be that few because the stickers only look beautiful in the notebook from about 10. Thank you for the attention and the wonderful podcast, Jack. Jack, first of all, thank you for being you and being such an awesome person and taking the time to send such an amazing email. You have no idea how much this encourages us and everyone on the network, frankly, when we receive stuff like this. So it means a lot. Going to your question, though, on stickers, this is a really interesting one because I was hunting down a very pricey laptop recently on eBay. And one of the things I actually look for to get a very pricey laptop for almost nothing is people who put stickers all over their laptops. The reason is because stickers actually seem to, for whatever reason, people do not want to go through the effort of removing said stickers. And so laptops that say would go for $800 sometimes will sell for $100 or $200. because they have stickers all over them.
Yeah.
And removing those stickers because your personalization of things that you like, somebody else doesn't like. In fact, there's one laptop that has anime stickers on it. The laptop is worth $900 and the top bid is $150 right now because there's stickers on it. And so getting those stickers off is a little bit of a pain, but it can be done easily. So that's one thing I want to point out about stickers. But as far as, so I usually don't put stickers on my equipment for that very reason, because I'm constantly selling and buying new equipment. And I know that value gets hurt tremendously by stickers, and removing them can be a pain, although it can be done. But sometimes you do remove some of the finish off of the top of the laptop case, depending on what they utilize. But for me, the companies I would put a sticker on my laptop for, EFF, Tor, Blender, Red Hat, Fedora, Arch, any of those, I would put a sticker on for OBS, and Destination Linux stickers, or any of our shows I would definitely put on. Usually I put stickers on that poster back there that you can't really see very well right now, but I showed in our behind the scenes view. As soon as I get stickers from folks, I kind of put them in the back there. But those are some of the brands I would definitely consider putting on my laptop. Michael, what about you? What are some stickers you put on your laptop? I don't think you do stickers either. I've never seen your stickers on your laptop.
I don't do stickers either, and it's not because of the same. I didn't even know that was a thing that would happen with the price of the hardware. That's interesting. I just don't have I don't have a lot of stickers to use in the first place. It's more of like I just like the sleekness of the designs of the computers themselves. So I feel like that kind of pulls it away from it. And so that might be why the quality of the price goes, why it drops so much. And so I just used to put on backpacks and especially my laptop case and stuff like that. I do like to put it there. But I would put, Fedora, KDE, PHP, Sublime Text, OBS, of course, OBS, and even Mozilla Firefox, of course, Steam, and naturally, Destination Linux and Tux Digital. And basically everything a part of Tux Digital, because there's so much great stuff. TuxDigital.com, check it out.
So you're going to put a sticker of my face on your laptop. We're agreeing here? Like if I send you a sticker of my face and then put Tux Digital at the top, you'll put it on your laptop?
Hold on a second. I got an idea.
What's happening? Oh, look at that.
There we
look
go.
At that beauty. You've got a whole DOS Geek logo the size of a regular human face, and you're going to scotch
tape it on the back of the laptop lid, because it's going to take up the majority of the laptop lid.
I expect to see that on at scale. I expect that to see on your laptop you're traveling around with. Awesome idea. I love that you just keep that around, by the way. That's really touching, Mike.
I knew where it was, but no, it's not. I don't keep it around. I just knew where it was.
You clearly keep it around because you had it there. So, Jill, what kind of stickers would you put on your laptop?
Yeah, so I do have stickers on my laptop, but I'm very, very, very picky about how they look. I don't like them overlapping. I'm very OCD about their position. So I usually only have between 5 and 10 on my laptops. So obviously the first one is a Destination Linux sticker, which I have on all of my laptops now. Linux Chicks of Los Angeles, the organization that I'm one of the coordinators of. The Southern California Linux Expo.
Scale.
Yes, scale. Lots of Chex Penguin stickers. Everything that Michael and Ryan said, because I love them all. And any of the 1,000 Linux and open source stickers from my cabinet that's next to me, which includes everything that Michael and Ryan said. I've got EFF stickers on there. I have Steam stickers. I've got OBS stickers on there, Fedora, Red Hat, you name it. Every distro is represented on this cabinet.
It's fantastic because we talk about like whether we use stickers or not, and then the whole time I didn't even think about the fact that in Jill's camera you can see like hundreds of stickers.
Literally, yeah.
But I love the one that's most pronounced is the Destination Linux sticker up there in the corner, in frame.
Yeah.
No, it's important. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I use, in fact, I am so OCD about sticker collecting that I make sure to get at least 2 of every sticker that I own so that I could put one in a scrapbook or on a laptop and then one on my cabinet.
Nice.
Well, Jack, amazing email, awesome question. Thank you so much for sending it. It really made a huge difference for all of us to see those type of emails. So thank you very much.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. And you know what another great sticker would be?
What's
DigitalOcean.
I want one.
I have one on here.
Lucky.
Awesome. That is awesome. We need to get some now too.
Yeah.
So cloud computing can be, let's say, complex, but standing up reliable, affordable cloud infrastructure really doesn't have to be. And at DigitalOcean, you can enjoy a comprehensive portfolio of compute, storage, database, and networking products that put your cloud infrastructure in capable hands so you and your teams can get back to doing what matters most, building world-changing apps that grow your business. With DigitalOcean, you also get predictable pricing, robust product docs, and services that developers love. That's DigitalOcean. And also, you can get support at every stage of growth. Whether you're a team of one person or a team of 1,000 people, with DigitalOcean, you get simple, powerful cloud computing for all types of sizes of teams, and you can get growing at DigitalOcean. And as a listener of the Destination Linux podcast and a member of the Tux Digital community, you can get started for free. It's better than free, actually, and with DigitalOcean, you're going to get a $100 free credit when you sign up at do.co/tux2022. That's do.co/tux2022. So again, go get started with your $100 free credit on DigitalOcean's awesome cloud platform by going to do.co/tux2022. I want to thank DigitalOcean for sponsoring this episode of Destination Linux.
So this week, I wanted to talk about a common issue that I see discussed, whether it's in forums or in message boards, live chat, where people are wanting to come to Linux. But one of the things that's keeping them from coming to Linux is Adobe support. Now, this isn't a Linux issue in the fact that Linux could run Adobe's software perfectly fine if Adobe would just make it so that was so. Yep. But they don't. So it's not like Linux is not technically capable of running Adobe products. They just don't make it for it. And I hope one day they do change their mind. But until that time, we're going to help people parkour over this hurdle, in fact, because Michael and me will be doing some parkour at scale probably
Naturally,
with our action cameras that Wendy convinced us to buy, even though we're the least actionable human beings.
What are you talking about? I can't wait. People are going to see how, we're going to just shred it. We're going to shred the parkour park.
We got the words down. I don't know that we have the physique down, but we got the words for sure to act like we're really actionable people. But in any case, we're going to hurdle over this for you and figure out ways that you can replace some of these items that Adobe subscription service offers, which is very expensive, by the way, at $59.99 a month to have access into this suite of products. And this is one of the beautiful things that Linux and open source does, is that a lot of people simply can't afford $60 a month, but they want to be artists. That is in their goals, or they're going to school to be artists. They can't afford this suite. And so what do? They just can't become an artist because they can't afford the $60 a month. So what we're going to do is talk about options for replacing Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, InDesign, Lightroom, and Adobe Express.
But before we get started, I want to be clear. We're going to give you alternatives, but not every alternative, depending on your use case, is going to be better than the Adobe solution. That's just an unfortunate reality that we're living in. There are some really good stuff that Adobe makes, but also there's some other alternatives that are really good depending on the space. And I also wanted to make a quick note about professional tools. We hear that the term thrown around all the time with professional, but what exactly does it mean? So I have 3 different classifications for what I consider to be a professional application, or where people would fit in these types of applications. So there's a focused professional, then there's an indirect professional, and an everyone else. So with focused professional is that the application is used by someone it is intended to be used for in a professional level. For example, with Photoshop, you would have someone who uses it as a day-to-day thing for like 90% of their work, and they're focused on using that particular application. Whereas an indirect professional is someone who can use this type of software for something related to their work, but that's not the main goal of their work. And then everyone else is just, amateurs or people who just want to play with these different pieces of software. So that's how I would classify it, because when a lot of times you'll hear people say, well, this is not good for professionals, but they don't specify what kind of professional they're talking about.
Right. No, I think that's a good clarification there. And everything we're going to cover here, we're going to give you some alternatives that work on Linux but may not be open source. So just keep that in mind. If that triggers you, I don't know, plug your ears or something. But we're trying to give the best options to get people moved over to the Linux platform, even if that may include something that's not fully open source yet. Jill, I have a question for you. You teach classes in college on things like animation. And the topic comes up, I'm sure, where students are like, hey, I need to utilize some software. What options can I utilize? And you probably have students that come to you with Linux, or they want to run something open source. So what do you do as a professor in those cases when the industry standards may naturally point them towards something like Adobe instead?
Yeah, well, that's one of the beauties of I teach advanced courses. So what's really nice is often the students, have learned the Adobe suite from the beginning and intermediate courses. So I have the joy of showing them all the open source options because they use Linux when they come to my classroom.
Nice.
It's just awesome. I actually show my students the best open source options available. The GIMP is great for creating quick textures for 3D animation and motion graphics and for converting their files to different file formats. Krita is the perfect tool for making hand-drawn artwork or brushstrokes to bring into their animations. And Photopea is an awesome online alternative to Photoshop. So for those students who just haven't really used anything other than Photoshop, I will often tell them just go ahead and use Photopea for your projects.
What I like is, so this kind of goes into our first subject of alternatives to Adobe Photoshop. So you've kind of given the three alternatives there. We've got GIMP, Krita, and Photopea as the alternatives to Photoshop. Now, Michael, I have to ask, when it comes to Photoshop and being able to replace it with these sources, talking again from, there's people like me where any of the open source options, I know this is going to shock you, work perfectly fine for all of my artistic capabilities. I see no limitations to them at all. But for other folks who actually do art and things professionally, where they make money doing this, you have seen some of those limitations. So let's talk about this. Are the alternatives that we talked about here going to be able to replace Photoshop for everyone or most people, or where does that fall in your mind?
It's an interesting question, and I'll break it down with the classifications I gave earlier. So these, all of these options right here are totally fine and will provide most of what people want in the everyone else category. So I would say 90% of people who would be using these types of applications would totally be fine with using any of them. They would accomplish what they need to for the most part. It depends on how, detailed you want to get into it. But in terms of the basics of just resizing, cropping, or like red eye removal and stuff like that, any of them will work for that purpose. When you go into the indirect professional realm, then you have some of them will be able to utilize these tools. And I can't really say exactly how many depending on what classification of what category and industry they're in, but I would say that, for example, photographers could use GIMP and Krita to do some of their touch-ups and stuff like that, and because they're an indirect professional, so they're using it maybe 5-10% of the time. When you're in the focused professional, where like I am, where I'm most of the time in these types of applications, I would have to say that Krita is a solid option in terms of what it can do, even though it's not really intended to do a Photoshop alternative. It's impressive how much you can do in Krita. And with Photopea, I would say that it is 80% as good as Photoshop. I wouldn't put it in the sense of like, it's not super close in terms of there are certain things it can't do, like it can't support CMYK, and they don't really have any plans to doing it. And also, depending on your hardware, there's a massive resource requirement depending on how big of the art you're using. Like, for example, we talked about earlier with the banner I made for scale. I made that in Photopea as a testing to see how far can I take Photopea before it kind of gives up. And this is a giant file. I think the last time I checked the file size, it was like 500 or 600 megabytes of a file. And it's just too much for Photopea to handle. So it just started crashing the application. I had to switch over to Photoshop in order to accomplish that particular piece. So I still use Photoshop if I have to, but it's rare now. It's actually been, I got away with using Photopea for 2 years without even opening Photoshop. And in sometimes I run into a problem where I have to use it. So I do have that as a spare just in case.
To dig in there a little bit, though, because I actually saw this live. Michael was working on the banner when he was at my house a few weeks back, and he was trying to do everything he could to manipulate the banner he needed through Photopea. And then it got to a certain point where it just crashed. And I was like, try Chromium browser. I'm just curious if that makes a difference because, naturally Michael's in Firefox. And it didn't. It still crashed again in there. So this kind of talks about why I think Photopea needs an app that you can actually download on your computer because there's only so much you're going to be able to do and load into a browser. But Photopea's capabilities are amazing. But when you talk about utilizing Adobe, you don't utilize the cloud subscription service. You actually have the old independent version, I believe, on a VM you're running it that way, which is an alternative for professionals who still want to use Linux, right? Is just to run something like an older Photoshop on a virtual machine.
I have run into a couple of cases where I had to get the subscription version, the Creative Cloud, and that is very rare. So what I would do is set up a VM, and you can download a VM that has actually from Microsoft if you want to, that gives you like 90 days for free, and then I would load it up, do what I need to do, and then kill the VM. And that is a solution I've had to do in the past, but it's I think I've done it only twice ever. And over the course of the decades I've been doing this, so that's not a huge amount. Then there's also the VM I do have that is a old version of Photoshop because it was before the Creative Cloud was introduced. It was the version right before that. And I have that one just because of I don't want to use the Creative Cloud if I don't have to. And because I already paid for that version, I can use that as long as I want to, and as long as it accomplishes what I need, then I can do it. But I try to avoid it as much as possible, and Photopea allows me to do that very well. So I was ecstatic when I found Photopea. I know I went to Ryan and said, "Oh my God, I can't wait to show you this. This actually allows me to do work without having to have Photoshop. This is so much of a game changer for me." And it has been for a long time, especially when I'm doing digital work. Print work can be an issue in Photopea, but the digital work is fantastic, and I am a big fan. It has all the stuff that I really love about the non-destructive editing style of Photoshop, like smart objects, smart filters, adjustment layers, layer styles, all these things that are practical for the professional in Photoshop are available in Photopea. That's why I'm a big fan of it. But I will say, I kind of skipped over one of them, and that's the GIMP, and it's because the GIMP is not really professional ready. Like it's, in terms of indirect professionals, you can kind of get away with using it, but in terms of people who have to be in it all day, every day, it's just not
even as
possible.
somebody who's not a professional, like to me, the GIMP is one of those things where I look at it and it just looks old and outdated, and I don't like its interface. Which brings me to a question, Michael. Like I do love the interface of Krita. I love being in Krita. Krita makes me feel like I want to go create art, even though I can't. It makes me feel that way. And so I kind of want to ask the question, what is the difference between a photo manipulation program like Adobe Photoshop or GIMP and Krita? Can you do everything you need to do with Krita? Can people just skip GIMP and go to Krita and do that there?
Well, in terms of the indirect professional, yes, I would say pretty much if you wanted to, if you're a photographer and you want to do some touch-ups, you can just use Krita, and it's probably fine. I don't have any issues that I've run into where I couldn't do certain things in that level. When you're talking about the focus professional, neither one of them really fit that vibe because the stuff that you want in Photoshop is more the workflow and the flexibility, not necessarily like filters and functions, because those things are important, but the workflow is the most important thing. And Krita has a very good level of workflow that kind of works along the same lines, but it doesn't have all the functions as well. So it just kind of it hits the workflow style, but not the functions. And GIMP hits somewhat of the functions, but not everything, and doesn't have the workflow at all. So that's why it's just not a practical option. But the difference between what GIMP is and what Krita is that one is an image manipulator and the other one is a painting tool. So it's focusing more on a particular type of art versus the image manipulation concept, which is what Photoshop is also. And this is a way to basically modify anything. So it's a much more broader scope and requires a lot more flexibility. And being able to do non-destructive editing is the most important piece, because with image manipulation, you're going to be making changes to something, but you also may create something from scratch, and you also may want to make changes later in the future and from all sorts of different layers. You know, if you want to change the way something looks, but you also want to change the way, like just a slight tiny piece of it with non-destructive, you can do every degree, whatever you want. Whereas GIMP is destructive, mostly. It's like 95% destructive. And therefore, a professional in this space doesn't even consider it, because if they can't go back and make changes, then they're not even going to even try to use this application because it just doesn't fit. Now, I've seen people talk about the interface of GIMP or the shortcuts of GIMP as if that's a blocker, and that's not the blocker. Like that, you can skip. It would be nice to have the consistency with how things work, but it doesn't have to. It's the functionality of destructive versus non-destructive. That's the biggest kicker. And
in the CMYK support, right?
CMYK is important for people who do print work, but if you just do digital work, then you don't need CMYK. That's why Photopea is good for a lot of people, because you can get away with not using CMYK. But it also has non-destructive editing, which is, because it has that, it makes it viable. Because GIMP doesn't have it, it can't be, a focused professional just can't even consider it.
So the best case scenario here, and then we got to move on to some others, is that Photopea decides, because they're brilliant developers, to create this powerful of an application in a web hosted design like they have. Get Photopea developers to go open source and bring Photopea into Linux, and then we would have the replacement for Photoshop near perfect.
I mean, that'd be great. I don't have a preference that it needs to be open source necessarily. However, making it work in Linux as a native application would be amazing. Like, it would be just the biggest game changer, period. It would be
game changing like gaming was for Linux. Because you remember 6 years ago, gaming sucked on Linux. We had, and also we'll get into it, video editing wasn't so great either, but things have changed around those two areas. And, we've talked about it a lot during that time, trying to encourage developers and things to take it serious, and how important gaming was. And it really changed things. And I think Photoshop is one of those where we do have alternatives, and in Jill's case, you can utilize them because Jill has that power, that seniority to be able to kind of force students to utilize that. But in most cases, most educational institutions are going to focus on Adobe Creative Cloud because that's the standard, and frankly, the options that we have aren't quite there up to par with it. But there are other things in the Adobe category where I think we do have alternatives that are up to par, much closer. And let's talk about Illustrator for a second. So, Jill, let's start with you. What are some alternatives if people are looking to replace Adobe Illustrator in the open source world, and how good are they?
Oh, Inkscape is wonderful. I think like Photopea, it's about 80% there. It's getting closer.
Close.
And because you can code in it and create your own extensions, that makes it so powerful. And so that's the one that I recommend for my students instead of Illustrator. And honestly, most of them that I've started using Inkscape were really impressed. They're like, "This is free?"
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
really impressed. So that's just, it's really nice. And as you were saying earlier, Ryan, in the video editing and animation space, that's a whole different story. That is Linux all the way.
Yes. 100%.
With Inkscape, I'm a big fan of Inkscape. I've been watching the development for years, and it has been like just the past couple of years has skyrocketed in its usability and its professionalism in terms of, not professionalism in terms of like how it portrays itself or anything, but in the sense of how the functions it has and features it has for professionals who need certain things. When they introduced, but they're currently in Inkscape 1.2, which is like the numbers is not really accurate of how many times they've made releases, because they were 0 point something for like 15 years. So I'm glad that they're kind of doing the more new versions, but they have one that's 1.2, and it's a significant update. I would suggest they just start doing the regular normal version numbers, because it makes it more clear how much the difference is in that sense. But when they introduced 1.0, it was a huge update, and they added a bunch of features that make Inkscape awesome, like being able to rotate the canvas, which is not that important for a lot of people, but it's for people who are focused professionals, that is critical. And when they introduced that, I was so excited to play with it, and it has provided a lot of value. Then I think that it is, like you were saying, 70, 80% close to Illustrator. There are certain workflows that Illustrator makes things easier, but for the most part, I think that Inkscape can absolutely do what you want it to do. Now, I know we talked about earlier about like the shortcuts and the interface not being exactly like how GIMP and Photoshop or whatever. I know there are some who say that these applications shouldn't try to be a copy of the Adobe counterpart. And I do agree to some points there, but I do think that there's the uniqueness approach isn't really that great, and it kind of creates an unnecessary barrier to entry. When one set of applications are the dominant solution, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's debatable. It's important to make it easy to get started with them alternatives. So if they can easily jump in with the keyboard shortcuts or the workflows, it makes it a lot easier to use it. And a lot of these applications don't have that sort of approach.
Yeah, and that's honestly, Michael, that's one of the things I love about Inkscape. And that I think all programs that are actually competing against monopolies like Adobe should do is have key binding mapping
100%.
options that are the same as their Adobe counterparts or customizable in the very least, so that you could convert them over to the key bindings you're used to in Adobe. And Inkscape does that out of the box. It used to be a plugin, and now it's featured in the latest version, 1.0 and higher. And also tools like Blender do that. They allow you to bring in your key bindings from Autodesk 3D Studio Max and Maya.
So imagine that. Some of the most popular open source programs have that as a default. We talked about this in an episode where we recommended developers don't shy away from this. Don't try to reinvent the wheel when it comes to shortcuts. This is a way you're going to get people to adopt your platform easier when they go check it out. If all the shortcut keys are something different for no reason, then you're just creating an additional barrier on top of having to learn the interface, learn where the tools are. Now your shortcuts, you got to relearn too, and they just give up and go back to what they're used to. You want to make that transition easier so we can get people on here. I love hearing how close Inkscape is. Michael, I, in fact, have created some incredible art because I wanted to show people what's possible. Why are you laughing? Why are people...
I was not laughing. You didn't hear
Stop
me laugh.
laughing.
I was muted the whole
Jill,
time, so you couldn't.
I am really disappointed in how you treated me this episode, Jill.
Aww.
All right.
I have worked so hard on what I call...
at least 45 seconds on this.
Can I talk about this piece for a minute before we... Because I plan to NFT it for millions of dollars.
Okay, for sure.
All right. So this piece was created around the time we did the Apocalypse episode of Linux. So we were going to talk about Inkscape's new version in the news section. And because of that, I spent seconds creating this art. And that you may be like, "What? That doesn't sound like a lot of time," but I just let it out of my heart. I let it flow. Here I want to present to the world Psychopolypse. Michael, will you please show Psychopolypse to people?
I have shown it, and this masterpiece, just you don't even need to describe it. Words can't really give its due.
Thank you.
It's
Actually, Ryan, it's a nice use of positive and negative space, and I like that you included a 3D element there.
I love you, Jill. I love you so much that I wish you were my professor in school, because I feel like you would really get me in my artistic abilities. Okay, so now you guys know why I'm kind of asking the questions and Jill and Michael are answering, because I have zero artistic capability. On that note, let's go into...
You see this? It's masterpiece.
Oh,
masterpiece,
I
yes.
was teasing you earlier, Ryan. You get an A for
It's okay.
effort.
Yeah.
It's okay, yes. Believe it or not, art actually is a thing. Like, my dad's a really good artist, my brother is, and then it skipped me entirely. Entirely. All right, so let's talk about InDesign. Adobe InDesign. Do we have anything to replace that with?
We do.
Grabus.
Yep, we have Scribus. So Scribus is a layout publishing tool like InDesign. You can use it to do layouts or like magazines, newspaper brochures, that sort of design work for print and stuff like that. It supports a lot of the similar functions that InDesign does. And I wouldn't say that it's in the same realm as InDesign, but I would give it in the same perception that Inkscape is to Illustrator, I would say Scribus pretty much is to InDesign. I think Scribus has a lot of potential, and the work being done on it is impressive, and I'm very thankful to the developers that created Scribus and, of course, Inkscape, because they're putting in the effort to provide a solution for those who are looking for such an alternative.
Plus CMYK support in Scribus, color support there.
Yep.
Spot colors, ICC color management, PDF creation, vector drawing tools, huge file type, bunch of different file types for import and export. It supports emulation of color blindness and the rendering of markup language like LaTeX or LilyPond inside of this tool. And it has a nice template base where if you're creating brochures, magazines, business cards, all those things, it has templates for those, which is pretty awesome. So if you've never checked out Scribus, definitely something to take a look at.
You know, it's been around since the years of Quark Express. And
Wow.
I remember using Scribus in the classroom and the students looking at me, what's that program?
I'm thankful it's been around. It's a great alternative. It's got some really cool features and some that I want to use for actually the conference coming up, some of the template designs that it has for business cards and things like that. So now we get in a category that I can talk about a little more, which is the alternatives to Premiere Pro. So all of us are content creators and create content in video. So I've utilized Kdenlive, Blender, Lightworks, not DaVinci Resolve, which I'll get into in a second. I have real problems with this one, although I'm glad it exists and some people can use it in Linux. It does create some issues with its compatibility. But overall, this is a category, again, that Linux was really bad in about 3-4 years ago. I had to create a bunch of videos kind of combating this in the Linux world because specifically DaVinci Resolve. People would go to try to install DaVinci Resolve when they were coming to Linux. They were trying to kind of copy that 30 days of Linux that I was doing. They would try to get that professional option, DaVinci Resolve, to run, and it never runs because for whatever reason, DaVinci Resolve has this thing for NVIDIA, and they don't work well with AMD at all in the Linux world, and even in the Windows world, it doesn't work very well with AMD. And getting it installed and working on distros is very difficult. You have to have that NVIDIA card, or you have to use the AMD Pro drivers, and there's lots of issues there. But I am happy to say that DaVinci Resolve is definitely at the same level, and in some ways superior entirely to Adobe Premiere Pro. It would be you would be taking this one has this and this one has that feature and doing a battle against it, because DaVinci Resolve does some absolutely amazing things. For me, Lightworks has been the professional one that I recommend to most people. It's not open source, but there are movies made with it. It has some incredible capabilities. The multicam support is insane in it, very easy to use, and runs in every Linux distro. And of course, I edit videos in Blender, which Michael makes fun of me, but Blender is the Swiss Army knife of everything. And you can do everything in Blender, and it
I
actually
don't make
makes
fun
a
of
great
you for using Blender.
video editor.
It's because Blender is so complicated and complex to even learn how to use. Like there was a tutorial where someone put on YouTube like an entire course of how to use Blender, and afterwards it's done. Basically, it was saying like this is how complicated it is, and there was like 15 different videos just for the basics of Blender. And I think you also made a video yourself talking about how to use Blender and teaching people to use it for video editing. It's really cool that it can do that, but it's not what it's for. So it's just kind of funny that that's your go-to now.
The reason why is because I wanted to learn more of the 3D art capabilities and be able to include that into my edits. And Blender has this amazing ability, as you know, to create and render 3D art. And so being able to learn that interface through video editing, which is something my mind understands, 3D art, it does not. Video rendering, it does, allowed me to learn the interface very well for Blender. So that's why I actually got into using it for that, because it was something that I needed to get done. And no, it is not the easiest one to use. If you get into Kdenlive and those things, far easier, make far more sense than their default layout. But it is a very powerful video editor, Blender, and can do some really cool things. But Kdenlive itself has come so far in the last couple years. Like it is in a whole different level. It went from like level 1, if you want to be frustrated and have your stuff crash all the time, use Kdenlive, to like real near pro level video editor. It's got a few things missing, but my gosh, that development team has kicked butt with Kdenlive.
Agreed. Kdenlive is what I use for my videos and for editing this podcast and all the other stuff I edit. It's fantastic. It allows you to do a lot of different things that professional tools provide, and it's surprising to a lot of people when you go into an open source video editor and have that much control. I've seen people tell me that they don't like using Kdenlive because it's too complex, it's too hard to learn, and it kind of makes me laugh about the sense that that's a good sign when it comes to professionals, because we want all that power and all those features.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of like, yes, you're right. It is kind of hard to get started, but once you get started, you see all its power. It has rotoscoping, it has masking, it has even support for doing matte layer transitions. And there's just a lot of cool stuff that makes Kdenlive possible to be professionally used. And I wouldn't consider myself a professional editor, but I do put in the effort to make sure that I can use Kdenlive in a level that I am satisfied with the motion graphics and stuff that I do, and the animations and stuff. And also, if you go back to a couple episodes of Destination Linux where Ryan insisted that I put a subscribe button that followed his finger, and I did that with Kdenlive, and it worked perfectly, I think.
Yep. Very well done.
Kdenlive has it's come so far that I can now recommend it for my students as an alternative to Adobe Premiere. Not completely, but partially. So at least they have that free option. But I actually have my students using DaVinci Resolve for many reasons. It is industry standard. In fact, it's taking over from the Adobe suite. Adobe has been noticing this, and a lot of the television studios are using it and the movie production houses. And one of the reasons is that, for one, DaVinci Resolve is less expensive, under $300, and you get a whole suite, which really combines Adobe Premiere and Adobe After Effects with superior industry standard color correction and compositing built in. So it is an all-in-one suite like animation and motion graphics of Adobe, but a lot less expensive, and you can work in the cloud to collaborate, but you just buy one standalone license and you're done.
And at least, unlike Adobe, they do some work to make it work in Linux. Unlike Adobe, that does nothing to make it work in Linux. I just wish somehow we could get the developers of DaVinci Resolve and the Flatpak crew together to come together and make DaVinci Resolve a Flatpak. And then we would have the literal best alternative to video editing, even though it's not open source yet. Doesn't matter right now. Just let's get this on the platform in a sustainable way where anybody can install it and enjoy DaVinci Resolve for what it is. And then we can work on the open source thing later. DaVinci will be coming for you. But on that front, but DaVinci Resolve is amazing. Like, the things that people can do with it is insane. It's just that installer problem and that AMD issue that we need to get figured out. And this would help them tremendously too, because like you said, Jill, a lot of the movie studios, they're not using Windows. They're using Linux on the back end to do these render farms and things.
Exactly. And one of the reasons DaVinci Resolve relies on Red Hat RPM installation. And that trickles down from Unix, because the animation industry went from Unix to Linux, especially, in 3D animation, went Unix to Linux. And even Maya was made originally only for Red Hat. And a lot of the old programs, the older animation programs, were meant just for Red Hat. So that's what they developed it on.
Yeah.
So that's why you can get it to work just fine on Ubuntu. Actually, it works really well on Debian.
It actually, Jill, doesn't work really well on anything if you don't have an NVIDIA card.
Yeah, it's
in my finding.
Well, again, because it needs that CUDA and it needs the compute.
Yeah.
So I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about the color correction that Jill mentioned with DaVinci Resolve, because it's not just that it's better than Premiere Pro, it's that it is drastically, astronomically better. It's considered the #1 option for color correction in the video industry. And I think that's awesome that we have that as an available for a Linux user, provided that they have NVIDIA.
So one of the wonderful things about DaVinci Resolve is that with that color correction, what stands it out from a lot of the Adobe products is the integration of 3D and being able to do 3D compositing and color correction with your 3D scenes that you can import from Blender, from Maya, from 3D Studio.
That is awesome.
Very important.
And
so
also,
Flatpak AMD support, we would have the best option on Linux available in the industry.
It would be the #1 choice that you would give someone, because it does fit that professional tool. And it's better than Adobe Premiere Pro in a lot of ways. Premiere Pro has some cool stuff that it is better than Resolve in some ways, but for the most part, the fact that it's even on the same tier that you can argue which one's better is a great sign. And the fact that it's available on Linux is awesome, provided you have NVIDIA. But there's also another application I wanted to talk about, and that is Olive. So Olive is an
Nice.
application I think has a ton of potential. Now, it's not in it's currently in like an alpha beta stage of development with the latest version. They have an older version you can try out that just kind of gives you a demo of what it can do. And you can try out the beta version if you want to. But the Olive video editor is something I think is very impressive because it kind of tries to blend some of the concepts of Kdenlive and Premiere Pro and provide a professional level tool that is, trying to do an open source approach to Premiere Pro, and it does it quite well. Now, it doesn't have every feature that I want, but it is an impressive application, and I can't wait to see what the future holds because they are just killing it with starting from scratch and making a very good video editor, and I don't expect it to take that much longer to get to that point because they've been doing it so quickly already, and I'm very excited.
As far as recommending, if you want to do content creation, those things, go Kdenlive. You don't need to pay for anything.
Yeah.
It's open source. It's amazing. It's come so long. And I think one of the biggest issues was crash recovery back in the day with Kdenlive, and they fixed that. I've never had an unrecoverable crash in Kdenlive in the last 3 years. There's been times, very rarely, that it crashes, and when it does, it recovers itself. So no issues there.
I've had issues with Kdenlive crashing fairly recently. I don't know what the combination was, but the thing that I love about Kdenlive is that when it does crash, it gives you a copy of the Kdenlive project so you don't lose any of your data. So it's creating on the fly, it's creating autosaves for you. Like it's not creating a save for your existing project, like you need to save it yourself, but it is creating automatic copies of your project inside of your system just in case, which I love that. And when I found that it did that, it blew my mind because there was one time where it just popped up and said, "Hey, would you like to recover?" Yes, please. Thank you very much. And then all of the stuff is back and I'm good to go. Like that is
It not only recovered my stuff, but it recovers my stuff from seconds ago. So it was like very recent recovery, which is great. All right. So moving on into this next category, photography. Me and Michael have shown on the Hardware Addicts podcast where Wendy is obviously a professional photographer, but we've blown Wendy away with our knowledge of cameras and our ability to keep our cameras in auto mode. Like she just thinks I think we kind of fooled her a little bit. She thinks we're like super good at cameras.
The best. We have such great autofocus that you just can't even tell that we don't know what we know what we're doing. I didn't say that. We know what we're doing. We have this great approach to photography that we actually get requests to do speeches at different conferences. Now, unfortunately, we don't have the time to do those things.
Yeah,
but
I apologize. We're very busy, very busy. But so Michael and I could totally go in here and talk to you about the best alternative to Lightroom. But I guess we should let Wendy do it. Whatever.
No, let's have the beautiful Wendy tell us all about it. She's amazing.
You didn't want us to do it, Jill?
What about our ability? Like, our ability to do photography is equal to our awesomeness at parkour. So,
we better let Wendy do it now that you said it that way, Michael.
Okay, that's fair. So, Wendy, take it away.
Thanks, Michael, for that super awesome introduction. Lightroom is the raw photo processing software of the Adobe suite. Now, what does that mean? You take those uncompressed files that your super awesome dedicated camera can do, and some of your smartphone cameras, and you're able to manipulate them. Say your image is too dark and you need to lighten it, or there's a color cast that needs to be removed. You can also do some awesome creative things with these different pieces of software like Lightroom. Now we have two great options when it comes to the open source world. That's Raw Therapy and Darktable. Raw Therapy is probably going to be the easiest for someone who is transferring over from Adobe to an open source solution. And that's because the modules or the different tools, the parts and pieces that you're manipulating are named a lot closer to the same thing. And then how you manipulate those tools or those different settings is very similar between a Lightroom and a Raw Therapy. Another one of the awesome things that Raw Therapy can do is if something's just a little bit out of focus, not really out of focus, but just a little bit out of focus, is it can help bring that back. That's super nice to when your focus is just a little bit off. Maybe your lens needs adjusted, but you've already got this image. You've got to make it work. And that's one of the places where Raw Therapy can really come in and help you out. Now, my favorite of these two is Darktable for sure. It's the one I started with, but it is very, very different to Lightroom. The The modules are named quite a bit different. How you manipulate those things is also quite a bit different. But one of the things that it does have that Lightroom also has is masking. Say you have a portrait of a person, they're under a tree, and now there's some green cast on them. You can use 2 different kinds of masks to help correct this. One, you don't want the green behind them to change colors, just what's on their skin tone. You can use a drawn mask to single out the person or just their face. And then you can use a parametric mask, whether it's based on luminosity, a certain hue, and whatnot, and adjust it from there. The masking is an amazing tool. There is so many different modules. I could deep dive into a lot of the different advanced things that you can do with these, but no, they are incredibly awesome raw photo manipulation pieces of software. Both of them offer great things, but of the 2, Darktable is my favorite and definitely for that masking. Hope that helps, and back to the studio.
Of course, I guess Wendy did a better job explaining those options than we could. Thank you very much, Wendy, all joking aside.
Aw.
You are amazing. Your Hardware Attic segment, The Camera Corner, has been one of the most popular segments on that show since we started. So I guess people want to hear from Wendy more than me and Michael. Fine. But there's a reason for that, because you're awesome, Wendy. And thank you. And Wendy is obviously a very professional photographer, and some of her work that I've seen has just absolutely blown me away. So definitely take what she says to the bank. We did get a super chat, Michael, and it was asking us about an alternative to Dreamweaver. We hadn't planned out an alternative to Dreamweaver, but this is an interesting one. I used to use Dreamweaver back in the day for the WYSIWYG functionality of creating sites by dragging things around. So let's get into it. What are some alternatives to Dreamweaver that you can use in the open source world? Blue Griffin's one, for instance, I tried out. Is that one you would say is a good alternative?
So Blue Griffin is a good alternative to Dreamweaver, but I have a different perspective of like the concept of what Dreamweaver is. But before I get to that, I want to take a second to just say, if you don't know that the show is live, it is live every week. And also this is proof that it's live because we're changing our show based on a super chat. Thank you very much for that super chat. So the Dreamweaver approach, I feel like, is out of date and isn't even necessary. You don't need an alternative to Dreamweaver, because even though Blue Griffin is a good alternative to Dreamweaver, in my opinion, the concept of having a application on your computer to do HTML and a little bit of CSS and stuff like that is out of date and really obsolete, because you can use different tools online to accomplish the same thing easier and deploy it much, much faster. Because if you have a WordPress instance, for example, you could use Elementor or Divi, which are plugins for WordPress, and allow you to do WYSIWYG changes on your website and then deploy them immediately, and then you're done. You don't have to worry about getting the files, uploading to a server, setting up the server, and all the other stuff that Dreamweaver and the same things like that would require you to do, because they're simplistic in what they allow, and these other tools that are on the cloud basically eliminate all of that hassle. And you just have a change it, deploy it, and you're done. And there's probably dozens of solutions for that. I was just mentioning the WordPress one because WordPress is very popular. It's an open source CMS that is basically 35% of the internet these days. But there's also a lot of other options, and there's even like software as a service, different services that you could do that do the same kind of approach, where you just do a WYSIWYG style. And for those who don't know what that means, it means what you see is what you get. So it's just more of a visual editing style rather than doing coding or anything like that.
Very nice. And Michael, you create websites professionally for people. So again, I guess you could take that straight to the bank. And other languages you had mentioned too, you could put together nowadays if you're needing to create more complex things, and is honestly the standard. It's the same thing I have to do with my folks who do web development on my team. We don't just use HTML and CSS anymore. We have to take a bunch of different languages and put them together to create the effects and needs. We can't use the WYSIWYG to accomplish any of that. So
right. I mean,
I agree.
There's pros and cons of WYSIWYGs depending on what you are. Like if you're a professional in this space like I am, I don't really use WYSIWYGs. But there are some that are fantastic. Like I mentioned Elementor and Divi. Divi is more for the kind of person who wants to make something that's WYSIWYG but doesn't have the code skill knowledge already. And Elementor is more of the other side, where it's a WYSIWYG for professionals. So you get the benefit of doing WYSIWYG, but also it kind of requires you to know how the different code works and to be able to make changes that way. So it allows a professional who knows how to do it not have to do it. And that's a fantastic combination. That's a hybrid that I love because it makes it possible for me to use all the knowledge I have without having to use all of that knowledge manually.
Yep.
But there's a lot of other options as well. There's tons. But the thing about, these Dreamweaver stuff, they're just not, they're just out of date and obsolete at this point. So there are some that you could check out. Like if you want to try out Blue Griffin, that's a great option as an alternative. But I would say that check out all the different other solutions for cloud, and you can't really list them all because there's hundreds.
Well, that's it. We have covered a gamut of solutions in the open source and some not open source, but definitely in the Linux world that you can use to replace the Creative Cloud suite. So if you've been on the fence of getting rid of that Windows partition, or you've been on the fence of wanting to switch to Linux, hopefully, as you could see, most of these are 80, 90% sometimes as good as the alternatives for Adobe. There's still some work to be done, much like we had in the past with video editing, much like we had in the past with gaming. But one of the things Linux does is it overcomes. And when we have conversations like this, honest conversations to say this is where we're at and this is where we need to be with things like Photoshop, we see those things change and shift, and the developers get in there, and community members who have the skill set get in there, and they create that next level application so that we can fully replace these suites, because nobody should have to be tied in to a specific suite determining what operating system they use. And hopefully one day, maybe Adobe will come around as competition has been heating up for them in so many elements, not only in open source, but outside of that, and bring a port to Linux to try to save their business. But if they don't, they're just going to end up getting replaced by an open source alternative eventually. It will happen, I think.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Blender's already done it with a lot of our proprietary biggie animation projects.
Blender is basically taken over a spot. Like, it has become the go-to in a lot of ways. And also, like, the latest version with the 3.0 is just so much
Blender,
better.
spectacular.
It's just awesome.
Yep, that's a perfect example, Jill. Blender is a case that shows what will happen if you just sit there and don't do anything. Blender's come in and kind of become the industry standard in there. I love Blender for so many reasons. Gosh, it's such a great alternative for almost everything. You could do anything with Blender, which is so great. But you know what? When you're going in and let's say you heard this episode and you're like, I want to check out Photopea because I need some of those more professional elements. Well, you're going to need to create an account, and you're going to want to make sure that account is secure. You're going to need a good password. And you know what you need for that, Michael?
Bitwarden.
Bitwarden. That's right. This episode of Destination Linux is brought to you by Bitwarden. Get started right now with your free account at bitwarden.com/tux. A password manager is software that allows you to have peace of mind knowing that your online accounts are secure. Bitwarden provides you the tools to store all your passwords in a secured vault, auto-generate those passwords and usernames for you, and even automatically fill them in. That's right. Now it can auto-generate usernames for you, which makes it even cooler. You can get access to data across all of your devices, whether you want it in your web browser as an extension, you want it on an app on your phone, you want it on your desktop. You can put Bitwarden literally everywhere. And Bitwarden seals and encrypts your private data with end-to-end encryption before it ever leaves your device, so you know you're the only person with access to your data. Michael, there was also another announcement Bitwarden had this week of another service that they're adding in, which is a service I talked about as an extension that I absolutely adore. You want to give us a little hint about this?
So this is really cool. It's basically being able to, in addition to generating passwords, generating your usernames, you can also now generate email addresses with Firefox Relay and two other services that it incorporates.
This is such an important service. One of the most important things that I use now is this Relay, because you need to sign up for sites at times. Do you know these sites can go nuts with the amount of notifications and emails and everything else they send you? Well, Relay allows you to create dummy email addresses, but you can still get those emails sent to you for the time you need them, like to get a verification or whatever, and then you can delete it and generate a different email later if you need to, or add multiple different email servers. It's amazing. Go check it out. But Bitwarden now interacts with that. Go to bitwarden.com/tux. They support us. They allow all of this stuff to be possible through their sponsorship. Show them how much you love them. Go to bitwarden.com/tux and sign up for their $10 premium account. Or if you can't afford that, no problem. They have a free account with tons of amazing features on there as well. We want to thank Bitwarden for sponsoring Destination Linux.
If you've been wanting to ditch iOS or Android for
Yes.
something true, yes, me too, for truly open source and privacy friendly solution, and I am a big fan of these types of approaches, and I think this one is a very interesting thing. So we want to pay close attention to this announcement because Murena has announced the Murena One X2. Now, to be clear, I don't know if it's actually pronounced Murena or not, but that's what I think it's pronounced. So
Good enough.
yes, and also it kind of reminds me of Purina One. But anyway, which comes paired with the privacy friend EOS or /E/OS, which attempts to decouple most of all of the Google services from Android while still allowing the functionality for those critical apps that you need. It basically stops most of the Android privacy issues and tracking with a true open source mobile OS.
I love EOS. I love the idea of EOS. The name just. Sorry,
name of
EOS.
No.
I can't. The E/OS. This is not a great.
No, sorry,
Yeah,
you mispronounced it. It's /E/OS. /E/. It's
but
very
this is
hard.
exciting news. I don't want to beat up on just a name because EOS has done an amazing job. Their actual operating system is super, super cool. And listen, anything that breaks up the monopoly that is Android and iOS, I am all for 100% board. This is somebody coming from the telecom industry. Like, we need it so bad to get away from this duopoly here in this. So I love this concept, and creating their own phone, I think, is a very important step towards this. And this isn't a sleeper phone. It's actually got some decent specs. A lot of times, some of these phones that come out like this are really, really low-end devices. This is definitely in your mid-tier range here. You get a 6.53-inch full HD plus IPS display at 1080 by 2242. You get 395 PPI pixel density and octa-core MediaTek Helio P60, which is backed by the Mali G72 GPU. It's got 4 gigabytes of RAM. Wish we'd let a little higher on the RAM spec, but that's good enough to run most applications and things pretty decently. 48 megapixel main lens. Wendy will tell us megapixels aren't everything, but at least they have some good stats here. We'd like to see what the glass is. See, I do learn on Hardware Addicts, Michael.
Yes,
I'd like
you
to know
do.
what the glass is that they're using here. And their secondary lenses are 8 megapixel and 5 megapixels. So they've got a 3-camera array here, and you're getting all of this for $369. So this isn't a $1,000 phone or a $1,500 phone, but $369, which is quite reasonable for what you're getting. And you get a phone pre-installed with EOS, so you don't have to do any of the extra steps or buy some other phone and then try to hack into it and worry about losing your warranty or anything else. You can get this Murena phone. And based on our research, and this has been really hard to tell, I think Murena is the big company that produces EOS. I don't know if that's true because it's very confusing, but it seems to be that's the case.
My guess is that Murena is like the commercial branch of the E Foundation. So like they're kind of on the same tier, but one is for the open source thing and one's for the commercial part. It's kind of like how Mozilla has Mozilla Foundation and Mozilla Corporation. Like that's how I feel like it's sort of that approach where they have like their equal footing, but I'm not totally sure because it's not super clear on their either one of the E Foundation website or the Murena website. I don't know, but that's my guess.
And here's the offer I want to make to the Murena team out there is that we will run these phones on this show. Get us 3 samples of these devices. Jill, myself, and Michael have committed that we will run these phones
Absolutely.
and give them a really good try. So I'm really excited about this, and I want to get them in the hand. So if they want, we could do a lot with them together in partnership here to see some of the ideas that we have to make these devices something premier that people want to use in open source. But just again, the idea of getting away from Android and iOS, it's blissful to me. It's like a dream. It's paradise just thinking about it.
Security issues alone. Just
Privacy, like privacy. Imagine having privacy back on a phone. My gosh.
So Murena or E Foundation, get in touch.
yes.
There you go. We will hook you up. Jill, take us into the gaming section because this threw me. This game is saying it's the father. It is the father. It's like a Murray episode. I am the father of CSGO. It's the father of CSGO.
It is called AQtion. AQtion is a fast-paced multiplayer first-person shooter that spawned actually one of the most popular and influential games of all time, Counter-Strike.
Love
Absolutely,
Counter-Strike.
Ryan.
Not good at it, but I love it. Yeah.
Same here. And the developers went actually for a more Hollywood-style realism than other FPS games at that time. So the weapons are based on real rifles, shotguns, and pistols, and the combat is fast-paced and brutal. It's showing its age, but it's still got lots of fun to give back. That's for sure. Over 600 community-made maps.
Dang.
Yeah, it's very cool. It also feels like this is a revitalization of that game. So it's like a modern approach to this retro style game. So it looks like it has all the stuff that it did support now supports in this. And this is really cool. I didn't know what it meant when it said AQtion was the father of Counter-Strike. When I first saw it, I read it as AQtion because it's spelled AQTION.
Yeah, the game is AQTION for those wanting to look it up.
Right. I had no idea what this was, and then I looked it up and found some more details. It refers to the original Action Quake, which was a mod for Quake, and I do remember that. And that made sense. Like, oh, okay, that makes sense now. I get why they're talking about it being the father of Counter-Strike. So that's really cool. And I remember playing Action Quake a long time ago, but I'm not sure if the graphics will hold up very well for now. So,
well, I was actually really impressed by it. It even had, when I was playing it, it even has when you sustain damage, you start limping and your character slows down. Nice. So they really tried for that realism, and I was really impressed by that. And yeah, speaking of which, Michael, Action Quake, it really set the stage for Counter-Strike, Call of Duty, and all the other realistic modern FPS games that followed. And what's also interesting is not only the connection with Quake, but the rabbit hole goes even deeper with Action Quake was originally a mod for Valve's Half-Life. And I remembered that when we were in our meeting a couple days ago, I was thinking, I think it was a Half-Life mod, but I had to go and check, and sure enough, and yeah,
it's
I
a mod
had
of
played
both.
it.
It was a mod of Quake and Half-Life. Yeah.
Originally Quake and then Half-Life. Yeah.
Action Quake's got some explaining to do. It's the father of a lot of projects out there.
It sure is. And it's free to play on Linux from day one. It just came out for us on Steam.
Can't wait to destroy Ryan in this retro first.
Yeah.
Never happened.
You have no chance, Ryan. No chance.
I'll show you who's the daddy.
We should. We'll have to play.
Talk about awkward.
Yeah. We'll have to play team deathmatch with the three of us, or capture the flag.
So I wasn't expecting that. If you weren't going to do a pun, I was going to do a pun. Like, Counter-Strike, I am your father. That type of thing.
That's what I was thinking this whole time. I am your father.
Yours was
to the next level.
Yeah, yours was out of the left field, and I respect it.
Thank you. All right, so let's get into our software spotlight, which is Cider. This is a really good name. We talk about good names. This is a good name for what this app does. So until you get your new Murena phone, you may be stuck in the Apple ecosystem and looking for ways to still utilize some of those Apple services while you're in your Linux desktop, because you're probably locked into those services since you're using Apple. Thankfully, you can keep listening to Apple Music using an app called Cider, which, again, I absolutely adore this name. Cider lets you listen to Apple Music on your Linux operating system, has features such as Discord, Last.fm integration, spatial audio support, equalizers, remote control using the companion apps, and so much more. So check out Cider. It's available as a flat pack, which is what I want to see DaVinci Resolve available as well. It's available as a flat pack if you need to use that as your music listening service.
The tip of the week this week, we're going to be talking about something that it's kind of interesting because we've talked about how there's different variables, and like the tilde key is a variable in your command line to define home. There's also another one that isn't clear exactly when you first start using it, but you might see it in something like CD // and that will kind of make you jump between a previous previous directory. But that period means the current directory that you are in right now. So if you wanted to use, copy a file to another file or another folder, you don't have to put the actual path. You can go to that path or that directory inside of your terminal and then do CP, the actual path to the existing file, and then just put period, and it will move that file to the current directory that you were in. And you can use this on all sorts of different types of scripts, and you can also do multiples. So like period / would also jump up 2 directories, and so on. There's a lot of different stuff you can do with that. And I think the key to this is knowing period represents your current directory. So you can actually use this across many commands and many scripts, and it is very powerful once you start messing around with stuff like that.
Nice. So getting into our announcements, we have Der Hans, who has hooked us up with all of the conferences you should be prepared to go to. The first one is Southeast Linux Fest, June 10th through the 12th. And our very own Cubicle Nate from Linux Out Loud and Linux Saloon is going to be there at Southeast Linux Fest, which is awesome. We have the Open Source Summit North America, Austin, Texas, June 21st through the 24th. Scale, where you'll get Michael, Jill, and myself, July 28th through the 31st. We will be together at Scale. So that's one you do not want to miss. And we have the 25th, Michael.
Guadec.
Thank you. That's going to be taking place in
Guadalajara
on July 20th through the 25th. And then we have Nest with Fedora August 4th through the 6th to check out as well. So a huge thank you to each and every one of you for supporting us by watching or listening to Destination Linux. However you do it, we love your faces. We're here every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern live at dlnlive.com. And the best part, everyone is invited to watch the recording of Destination Linux each and every week. If you're not here watching the recording live, honestly, you're missing a lot of show content. There's so many conversations and things that go on to make this show happen. If you've not experienced it, you need to at least try to experience it once to see how this show gets produced. It will shock you that a show actually comes out of this.
Well, there is an alternative to that, Ryan. They could become a patron and get the unedited versions of the show and watch it anytime they want to. Go to tuxdigital.com/contribute and click on the patron button for Destination Linux, and you can get the unedited versions. You can see all the glorious content that you're not able to check out, and you can join us and the other patrons in the patron-only post show in our 60,000 square foot virtual stadium, and we have this post show every week after the show. So join us by going to tuxdigital.com/contribute and becoming a patron. And if you also want to, you can check out the swag that we have to contribute to the show. You can go to tuxdigital.com, click on the store link, and you can pick up some swag. We have t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, coasters, stickers like we talked about earlier in the show. So much great stuff. Go to tuxdigital.com/store and you can get access to all the great stuff that we have for some swag.
Make sure to check out all our wonderful shows here on Tux Digital. We have the Pseudo Show, This Week in Linux, the DOS Geek channel, Linux Out Loud, Hardware Addicts Game Sphere, and Linux Saloon. So everyone head to tuxdigital.com and subscribe to all these awesome shows. And don't forget to leave a rating on your favorite app so others can discover the power of open source and keep those penguins marching and the full Monty of Linux and open source awesome sauce. Everybody, have an extremely awesome week. And remember that the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
I love it. You know, we need shirts with extreme on them. I mean, it's become like a staple now, Michael.
Agreed.
Like,
Yeah.
Agreed. And we also have to have a smiley face inside of the extreme somehow. I like it.
Yeah.
Aw.
We'll have to get that done. It'll be extreme.